Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track by an act named 3YT titled 10 Toes Down. And if we switch over to here, apparently this track has been produced by Royster59. This is on YouTube, so we're going to be listening through this track and watching the video from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Available on streaming services. Good.
They did a three-man weave, and there's three white guys, and their rap group name is 3YT. That's amazing. That is amazing. Listen.
Hard for man to care about the breath of stranger. Sorry, child, I left you in the depth of danger. Septic pile, the world will soon regret its stature. Blessings hide when you live in an echo chamber. Hard to
Blessings hide when you live in an echo chamber. I like these lines.
smile when cog of the machine we in. Heartless times, the martyrs get no CD spins. Pardon my aggression towards the greedy man. I'm Nikolai, but Tesla or Mashigian. Maybe Machiavelli. Hail Mary, hail Jehovah, hail Yahweh, hail slash I parry. Well past the various cell as they're sharing to tell facts. I'm wary, devil tactics scare me until caskets buried. I'm sworn as your nemesis. Close mind and write the Lord adorn sentences. Ghosts hide the form of Homo Borg Genesis.
I ain't worried about that. They say my days was numbered. Why they think I won? Gotta act 10 toes down, no pressing girl, the way I bounce back. 10 toes down, no pressing girl, the way I bounce back.
Another thing I really appreciate just before we get into the second half is the actual backing behind it. The claustrophobic nature of the kit with those woodwinds, I suppose they are, just
This is God using voice as a vessel. All you frauds,
guitars, I suppose, on the side?
Whole facade do the devil, don't force.
no, they're keys, aren't they?
Second, get to thinking you're special. It's pretty reckless, wearing necklace, square and compass show level. But instead they'll just push and pull. The fabric's uncomfortable. This matrix feel like cages, perfect placement. We're under those. The days with serpent phases when our faces are glued to phones. Arranging civilization, complacent, but who'd have known? Abrasion from chasing nameless occasions. They basic, all them fakes that you came with, shaking sensations, making changes like facelift. This radio station's amazing, you not changing. I stay alienated, painting waves I created.
The way the bass sits in your chest is Royce 59 created. All the hi-hats ensemble to form the vibe they faded. The ebony keys and fell hammers are striking strings in a box as performers sing from a choir that's known to bring out emotion. Tried to warn them, I told them, come for me, I'll grow horns. The snares and flutes sound for war. The armies march to the score. Forward with left and right shoulder mounted weapons. I got battalions ready for wild, and in my drop they get stepping. So if you hear a louding rumble, that one seen from a distance, but growing closer to your ears, you'll clutch your chest as you witness it. It might be 3YT mixed with nickel 9 laying wax, or maybe the brigade is closing in on you and your saddened tracks. Use knowledge.
So like this, I'm trying to figure out what the story of this is. We're talking about people with their faces glued to cell phones and stuff like that, but we're also comparing our music to other people's music and stuff like that, and sort of trying to get a gauge for it. I'm gonna probably have to listen to this one. I think the track's really engaging though, like the backing and motif behind it. It's like versatile enough to suit the different vocalists we have in the background, the different rappers, but also distinct enough to be able to sort of establish it as the main part of the song and for it to have a sense of uniqueness. So I think it's well produced, and I think the vocal performance is solid. We're going to talk about that more in the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named 3YT titled 10 Toes Down, which was again produced by Royster59. Now what do I think this track was about? We had basically, because I listened through it again, I think it's not necessarily a diss track. I think we're trying to sort of separate ourselves from those that we're speaking to, and so maybe we're sort of talking to someone else who is also a rapper or something like that. And we're discussing, like, they talk about how being left behind and everything like that. There's like sounds of war that they're discussing with the different instruments, which I really thought the imagery with the instruments was great. Because there's 3 different vocalists in this track, and I think they're maybe presenting their own sort of idea of the situation and their own interpretation about it. with one more sort of talking about the war and like the instruments and everything like that are involved in, the way the bass hits and everything like that. Another talking about like the Matrix and necklaces and stuff like that, and trying to sort of remind you that you're not special. And then when the first verse we're talking about, you know, not caring about the breath of strangers, and then like how the martyrs get no CD spins and everything like that. So what are we trying to, are we giving our own thoughts on people who think they're better than they are but they actually aren't, and trying to sort of, you know, advise people to remain humble? But then we've also got like, you know, talking about like the Matrix and how like there are people below us. So we're talking about like people addicted to their phones and everything like that, because there's several mentions of phones and how they sort of like, is it basically that they're trying to sort of communicate that they've got their head out of the clouds and they're down to earth and they're ready to get better down to business, and everyone else has sort of got their heads up in the clouds and they're not sort of wedged in reality. They're in some sort of like alternate sort of fantasy where they have a shot at being equivalent to these guys, or having a shot at the kind of stature of the music that they make. I think that's kind of it. I think that each of the verses were articulate and very poetic, and I enjoyed the way they were phrased. There were different ways of expressing ourselves with different uses of language there that made them more distinct. It was great to have the last rapper in a lower vocal range so that they sort of did sort of like stand out a bit more, but every rapper in here had a different way of sort of phrasing their bars and stacking them. And as I mentioned, I think the backing was like neutral enough for us not to need to worry too much about needing to be hugely different with the way we sort of communicated. There seemed to be a connection between the three of patience with the person that we're discussing, but just gently reminding them that they are maybe not on the level that they need to be, and they need to sort of step back and kind of keep their head down and keep sort of grinding away in their own path. The different vocal performances were on point. They were nice and clear in the mix. Clear sort of understanding of the words involved there. I mean, I know there was a lyric track at the same time, but without the lyrics being written, I'd probably be able to understand them just fine. There was good control of the head and chest voice there. There were several different ways that we sort of like the first vocalist was dun da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun. And having that sort of rhythmic consistency, for example, makes it very easy to sort of like kind of nod your head along to it, because it's very kind of, it's pleasurable when you go, oh, dun dun da 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 da. Whereas the other raps that we had were a bit more sort of free form and explored well. But I think it was nice to have that difference between the two halves of the track, to have them more sort of like, how do I describe it? Predictable phrasing there. It wasn't like that the whole entire time, don't get me wrong, but it was just a little bit easier to follow, and then you get more diversity rhythmically near the end. The performance of the track overall, like emotively, was fairly balanced. I think that we had enough sort of cut with the words there, and they were colourful enough to be able to get by. The lyrics overall on the track were intelligent, and I think that the individual members of this act carried themselves with a swagger that was completely reasonable. I think there was like a sung part by a woman in the middle, kind of maybe giving I couldn't tell whether we were trying to infer that we were or we weren't going to keep pushing forward, but I suppose it was about like keeping our 10 toes down on the ground and just moving forward despite the things we needed to overcome. I'm wondering if they're in a position where the members of this act have already overcome those challenges, so they're trying to sort of let the person know give them the hard facts about the life the direction they're going to be headed in. I'm sort of trying to still put the pieces together. But it's nonetheless, it was interesting to have a different vocal texture for that middle part there, just to kind of separate from the two sides. The track at 2 minutes 30-ish, 2 minutes 30, because we had like bits of like an intro and outro there with promotional stuff. I think it was well structured. Again, we had a lot going on with the verse stanzas and the bars there. The lines are well delivered. What we had in the background, we had an acoustic drum kit which got a really nicely balanced sort of low end to it. Those kicks had a lot of pep to them. There wasn't really a bass element. I was sort of wondering if there was, but it was kind of interesting because the kick kind of was so thick that maybe that was to make up for a lack of a dedicated bass instrument. I mean, we might have had a bass, but it was just very subtle. We had like keys. We had the keys. Initially, I thought they were guitars just because of the way they were modulated, but no, they were definitely keys, and they played this 8th note groove, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3. I think it's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. It's either an 8th note groove or a quarter note groove at a faster tempo. But either way, it was kind of perilous, and it had a sense of it was kind of exotic sounding. I don't think it was in a traditional major or minor. And that allowed us to kind of have a bit of kind of angst and tension in there to follow along with some of the lines there that kind of floated that way. I think the flutes cascaded nicely. It was often harmonized elegantly, and it was nice to have them come in occasionally, especially like with the mention of the woodwinds or the flutes in that last verse. It's nice when like things in a song mention other elements there and there's a chemistry between the components. It was nice not to have the drums the entire time. You know, we had an established 8th to 16th note beat, but when things just floated there, you know, it really just kind of, it stung. It was like things were about to drop again. You were just kind of waiting for when that was going to occur. Because I think it was kind of a honky-tonkish tone for the keys at some point. I've just gone back a little bit. I'm having to sort of like reference stuff, but like either way, I think the keys had a really sort of unusual tone that had a general sense of uneasiness to it, coupled with that sort of unusual scale melodic passage. But outside of that, I mean, the theme was fairly consistent throughout. It's just I really wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. I think part of what I appreciate with the overall beat behind the rapping is that it doesn't just go with the big full kind of bass line as like the way to kind of have a foundation. The vocals, I think, are punchier because of a lack of bass. The theme itself, with that said, as I mentioned, it sounds kind of perilous, just like the keys. It was foreboding, like we'd entered a warrior's domain, and I think what we talked about with like the war and the battles and the battalions, all that later on, kind of tied into that. With a general sense of like, again, tension and angst. It wasn't overly aggressive, but it made you feel a little bit uneasy, and I think that was a smart move. I think that establishes, it's just because of the overall minor tonality there, the sizzle to the hi-hats there, establishing a movement forward, and it was just a really intriguing vibe for the whole 2.5 minutes. The studio production, recording, mixing, and mastering was on point. I think that it sounded commercial grade. There was a nice presence and a sheen to the way that the vocals were captured with solid takes. Again, the pianos, the whatever other synths or whatever other effects in mid to high range there, any other plucks there that was subtle, the drums example, it had a sense of emptiness when there wasn't that low end there, but that was deliberate on part of the arrangement. There might have been like a sub bass, a very sort of low end kind of sub bass there, whether like an 808 that was down the bottom, but aside from that, like it was kind of dope. Things were nicely positioned in the frequency spectrum, should I say, so there was no overarching or elements there that were kind of unhappy with each other. There were no sort of awkward sort of interval phrasings or anything like that. It was nice and wide in the stereo field as well, so things were, like they surrounded you in the mix. It was really full. There was dynamic range to this. Things were not the same loudness all the time, in part due to the way that we had the drums come out occasionally. So from an arrangement perspective, we had that, but also just simply because like there was no pumping in the limiting, so the bus compression was handled. Like it was loud, but it wasn't squashed. And that's effectively my review of this track from an act named 3YT titled 10 Toes Down, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go check out the various social medias and the YouTube page and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they have more than ever thought of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.